welcome back. So we all saw Anna's video. Girl, I feel you. Some of these books really do be getting you in some bad reading slumps. I mean, some books just do that to you, And the day that I'm filming this is March 1st, so it's the first day of Women's History Month, and I think it's a little anti-feminist of me that I'm going to be talking about The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi, and the fact that I did not like it. And if it was not for N.K. Jemisin's The Fifth Season, I also would have gotten into a really bad reading slump, Like, I feel you. Fortunately, though, A is usually the one that does, like, the reading of the bad books, so that by the time they go through her, I don't have to read them, and I'm spared that. This, unfortunately, was a case where she could not save me because I love Roshani Chokshi's The Gilded Wolves so much, and so I was really stoked when she said she was going to release an adult book. I pre-ordered this thing before it even had a title or this beautiful cover. I mean, look at this cover. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. My expectations were high. They were so high. And in that vein, this is probably my fault. It's my fault that I didn't like the book. It's really, yeah, my expectations should not have been that high. I just really love her work, and it's supposed to be this like gothic-esque book, and I probably also didn't help. Sorry if this is a little ranty. I'm just like, there's just so many emotions, but it probably didn't help that I actually went to see Roshani in the tour that she was doing for when this book released, her book tour for this, and I heard what she had to say about the book. And I think that then also added to my expectations and what I was expecting. And again, my fault. I shouldn't have gone. But she was talking about how the book was essentially an exploration of marriage and fairy tales and like what happens after the happily ever after, right? And this exploration of that concept, and also an exploration of what it means to be like a monstrous woman in fairy tales. And I was like, okay, dope. Those concepts sound super exciting. I'm super excited to read the book. Yeah, moment of silence for me. Okay, so let's tackle this in sections. So I'm gonna talk spoilers. There's gonna be heavy spoilers. So if you have not read this book, come back after, or I mean, I guess I can give my spoiler-free review before I get into spoilers. It was like a 2.5 for me, which like hurts so bad to say. Just the narrative was like, the story that was being told was kind of boring because of the person telling it. And I'll get into why more when I talk about spoilers, but it just wasn't as enticing and captivating as like the flowery language leads you to believe. Hi, viewer. Hi, my cat is trying to scratch my chair. Anyway, yeah, it wasn't a good read. If you really like flowery, like, because this book read like I was reading a really long flowery poem, and if you like that, which I normally do, which is why I was very surprised when I didn't like this book, but if you like that, you might enjoy it. Yeah. Okay, anyway, getting into spoilers. So again, I went into this book with what she had said in the book tour that I went to go see, which was that this book was supposed to be an exploration of what marriage is after the happily ever after. And this was not. It was not that. First of all, they're barely together in the book. Like, you have a handful of scenes where Indigo / Azul, spoilers, and the bridegroom are in the same room and actually communicating. Like, it's very rare that they're actually communicating, because there's two stories going on. There's a story between Indigo and Azul. I'm gonna keep wanting to say Azul, even though it's Azul. If I say Azul, their names are blue, okay? It means blue. Anyway, Indigo and Azul, and then there's the bridegroom and Indigo / Azul. And those two stories are like, I don't know. I'm just really sad. The book felt so long because the bridegroom scenes were just so unnecessary. Like, again, there's barely any scenes where he's in the room with Indigo / Azul, except for the beginning, obviously, when we're meeting them. And there's that beautiful scene at the restaurant, which she actually talked about, with the author actually talked about too, that she had included from an experience at a restaurant. She didn't see it, but she heard that they had on the menu this drink that you could order, and it would come with diamonds, and you would throw diamonds into the drink. So it started off really cool, and I was super excited. And the bridegroom was meeting Indigo / Azul, and he was like completely captivated by her. And I was like, great, okay, so we're gonna get the story where he's realizing that she's not like this mythical creature, and like we're gonna break down what it means to like be like a beautiful woman who is like being projected to be this like mythical creature, and what those expectations mean for a marriage, and how those expectations will make a marriage crumble. Like, when the expectations of putting this person on a pedestal just don't meet up with the reality of the person. And that's not what we got, like, at all. I mean, maybe like at the end. The story was really about, the thing for me is that the story was really about Indigo and Azul and that relationship. For me, that relationship was so interesting. And it does touch on that aspect that she was talking about at the tour too, was this concept of monstrous women in fairy tales, and like how fairy tales tend to make women like these evil creatures. And like the relationship between those two girls were what was so captivating. Watching Indigo, this like rich, narcissistic girl, you know, basically dig her claws into this other girl who has a really bad home life and is really looking for a mode, like a means of escapism and something to help her cope with like the reality of her crappy life at home. And like, you know, as children, we cling to these ideas of magic that will save us. And Indigo, being rich and having all these privileges, is able to create that world for Azul. And so we get why Azul gets so easily enthralled and captivated and lost in this world and in Indigo, you know. And there's a line where she's like, I did not mind being Indigo's shadow if it meant that like she had access to this magical world, which is essentially just like the riches that Indigo has access to. And I just, again, that relationship was so interesting. And I found myself getting annoyed when we had to like switch back to the bridegroom, because again, the story just wasn't there for me in that like perspective. Like, it was just kind of really boring, because he's just like wandering around the house and, you know, doing flowery languages and going through the rooms and be like, oh, who did I marry? And it's just not captivating in the same way that it is watching these two girls and their relationships and this power struggle and this dynamic that happens when there's one person that has a lot of control and power and access to privilege, and this other person who does not have that same access, and what that means in that dynamic, especially as teenage girls. That's another thing. This book is not adult. I don't know why it needs to be classified as adult when most of the book, not just because of the age of the girls, because most of the book does take place when they're in high school, but because I don't see like adult themes necessarily explored. Like, if it had been about marriage and exploring marriage, okay, the book is adult because it's like an adult theme, like teenagers just don't know what it means to be married. But it was really about exploring this relationship between Indigo and Azul, and they're like, the way that the relationship changes as they grow up. So it's like coming of age, which is YA, and like not in a bad way, like in a very like, yeah, like this would be very interesting if I was like 15 when you know, it like it would have made sense for it to be classified as YA. Like I really don't understand what makes it adult, besides like the fact that like a lot of the story takes places when they're adult, but like even the sex scenes that are in here, I don't remember them being that spicy compared to like some adult romances that I've read. It was very much like cut to black, which you see also in YA. Like, I don't know. I just, again, it didn't read like an adult book to me. It wasn't exploring adult themes in any kind of capacity. It was really about the relationship between Indigo and Azul, and them being teenagers and kids and meeting when they were kids, and Azul very much being, like I said, being okay with being Indigo's shadow, and then growing up, like seeing other people in her class going to college, and her being asked like what she wants to do with her life, and her realizing, I do want to have a life of my own. I don't want to be Indigo's shadow for the rest of my life. And again, I feel like that's something that like teens can relate to. Like I remember, you know, wanting to disappear as someone who also grew up in like not like the best circumstances, this like call to magic and like wanting to escape into someone else, and being okay just being kind of like a wallflower up until you reach a certain point where you're like, I kind of want to be my own person and make my own life choices and stand on my own, which is a very like teen experience. Again, going back to like, I don't understand why it wasn't YA, because I feel like teens would really relate to that. And like that was a good story. Watching the way that Indigo reacts whenever Azul tries to break free of her grasp, again going back to this concept of monstrous women. Indigo is a monstrous woman, right? She's this narcissistic, controlling person who just wants Azul to be under her control, and that's kind of like a monstrous thing, you know. That's something that like not a great person does, but like we understand that that's just like a byproduct of the environment that she grew up in. She's never had to like lift a finger to do anything for herself, so she expects people to just like be under her control and follow suit. And then like I get, again, this concept of monstrous woman shows up again for me in the fact that like at the end we see that when Indigo kept saying we're gonna go into the Fae realm, we're gonna go into the Fae realm and be Faes, what she meant was like unalive themselves together and pass on, and that would be how they reach the magical kingdom, because yeah, they would stop aging at that point, because when you unalive yourself, you do stop aging. So she's not wrong. And like having that horrifying realization that Azul has to be like, shit, she means not like magical Fae realm, she means, you know, upstairs, wherever it is that you believe that you go after you die. And so she kills Indigo as a way to protect herself, which in itself, killing someone is a monstrous act. But I mean, Indigo did it as a way to like protect herself and preserve her own life, and again, be able to get out of this grasp that Indigo has on her. That's an interesting story. That has some weight. I don't like this, like the plot with the bridegroom, and when he's like looking for like into her secrets and trying to figure out who she is, like it just wasn't as interesting as the actual story going on between these two girls not two girls, because Indigo, Azul kills Indigo when they're like about to graduate, so they're still like under 18, so yeah, they're still girls. Between these two girls, you get, but you like every time you switch over to the bridegroom and he's just like wandering around her home, it's just like, yeah, this is kind of boring. And at least for me, I kind of already, like, I had guessed, like I caught on to the fact that like Indigo is actually Azul. Like, I caught on to that much, so it just, I don't know. There wasn't enough substance and enough time spent with the bridegroom and his actual relationship with Indigo. Like, if it was gonna be about exploring their marriage and like what this secret does to their marriage, and like the fact that she was never gonna be completely herself because she was hiding the secret, I wanted to see those scenes of like what that meant in the day-to-day, like what that tension created, the issues that brought. Instead, we just get the bridegroom being like, yeah, we had like a really good time in the marriage up until like right now, when I'm seeing that she might not be like who I think she is. But when you're carrying a secret like that, it's gonna impact your day-to-day. And it's gonna impact your marriage, where you're supposed to be wholeheartedly yourself with this person that you're sharing your life with. So knowing that, and knowing that Rashnia herself said that it was gonna be an exploration of that, and then to read it and not see that, which is kind of really disappointing. Yeah, it was just kind of really disappointing. And then on top of it, the book felt so long. It's a short book. Like, this is not a thick girl by any means. And I read it in like a day, for like a couple hours. And mostly because I was skimming. I'm not even gonna lie. Most of it was just like the bridegroom walking around a room that was also described in like Azul's chapters. So I already knew what the room looked like, so I was skimming. It felt really long because, again, his scenes just weren't necessary. And there wasn't enough there between him and Azul to really make me care about the end. Right, so at the end, we realized that Indigo is actually Azul, and that Azul had to kill Indigo. And he finds the body, and there's this like moment where he's like, shit, my wife's actually a killer. Except I don't care about the consequences of that it has, because there was nothing there for me to really care about this relationship between the bridegroom and Azul. Like, because again, they were barely in the same room together for most of the book. It was just him wandering the home and like thinking back to his childhood. That's another thing. The plot with his brother and like, I caught on to the fact that his brother probably did exist. He was just murdered. I had thought that it was the dad, like the dad had, but it was actually that they were hiding from the dad because the dad was abusive, and he like died because he didn't have access to his inhaler because he was waiting for the bridegroom to come back and get him. And that is devastating. And that was sad. But again, I don't understand why it was there, especially like was it supposed to be that he like also had a secret and they were both carrying these secrets that they didn't want to talk about? I don't know. I'm grasping at straws. Like, that plot line was super sad. But again, I kind of caught on to that. So when it came time, it's not bad. I do want to say it's not bad at all to have predictable twist in your books and in the narrative. That means that they make sense. And it's a good thing for things to make sense when you're writing a book. So it's not at all bad that like I was able to predict these two big twists. What was bad was that I like didn't care like at all about them. Yeah. Also, like, I know that the bridegroom doesn't have a name because it's like supposed to be I'm forgetting the word, but there's a word for it. But it's supposed to talk about how the fact that in fairy tales it's typically the bride that doesn't have a name. But the book was about Indigo and Azul. I don't understand why he was there. Like, I keep going back to that, but that's because it's true. Like, I don't know why he was there. Like, yeah. I don't know. And again, the language was just too flowery for me. In some instances it works. Like I have in my notes this instance where Azul was talking about her mom, and she says, when I was little, she had been a walking flame. But fire requires feeding, and either my mom didn't know how to sustain herself or stopped working at it. Over the years, she starved and shrank until she was a matchstick, a short burst that quickly chewed down the wood and inspired no warmth. Like, that imagery is beautiful. I love that. And there's a lot, that's not true. There's not a lot. There's a couple instances where that really, really works. But most of the time, it reads like this epic, again, really long, flowery poem with a pretty, like, okay ending at the end. Like, there wasn't a lot to justify this big, flowery language for the story that we actually got between the bridegroom and Azul. I think it would have been, when it was in terms of Indigo and Azul, and you had this big flowery language, and it was like this magical realism of the house and this other world, that really worked because it like heightened and talked about the relationship between these two girls. It works so well in those instances because they were creating this magical world for themselves, especially in Azul's case, to cope with the reality of her situations. But when it came to the bridegroom and Azul, there was just not enough there for that language to make sense because, again, it was just him mostly exploring the house and speaking to her grandma, or no, not her grandma, her aunt without Azul in the room. I don't know. I'm pretty sure this is completely incoherent, and I'm sorry for that. I have like a whole script that probably would have been more coherent. I just was like, I turned this on and just started ranting because I was truly so disappointed. I was looking so forward to this book, and again, this concept of exploring like the happily ever after marriage sounded like a really, really cool concept, and I was really excited to see that, and then I didn't see that. But yeah, if you like flowery language and like sort of drawn out stories, you might like the last tale of the flower bride. I don't know, there's not much else I can say about it, I don't think. Yeah, let me look through my notes. Oh, something that I did like was that you could see that Azul had ties to the mortal realm, as Indigo would say, because again, Azul did not have these privileges to just be able to like go away to the other world because like of her mom and like the creepy guy she was living with. Like, she did not have these privileges, so she was forced to deal with the reality, unlike Indigo. I did think that that was really interesting, and that exploration of that was really interesting, which again, story should have been just about Azul and Indigo, and it should have been a novella, not a novel. I read Ali's with Books. I don't know why that. I'm dyslexic, y'all. Anyway, I read Ali's with Books review, and she mentioned that this book really should have been a novella instead of a book, and I agree. It would have, if it was just a novella of Indigo's and Azul's relationship, would have been great. I think I would have really, really enjoyed that as opposed to what we actually got. Yeah. That's really all I have to say on the matter. Again, 2.5, and the 5 is really just because it's Roshni Chokshi and I love her, and it hurts my soul to give this book anything lower. But yeah, that's the last tale of the Flower Bride and my little mini rant / review. Let me know in the comments down below whether you liked the book, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. And don't forget to subscribe, and next time you'll see A and whatever she wants to rant about.